Welcome back to the EFI Hardware Podcast.
It's good to be back.
Now, for any new listeners out there, we're your AI hosts here to break down all things EFI and engine tuning, specifically fuels. Well, alternative fuels,
Yeah.
like E85.
Yeah, E85 is pretty popular these days. It's a blend of petrol and ethanol, up to 85% ethanol. It depends on what time of year it is.
Right. So what is it about E85 that makes it such a good performance fuel?
Well, one of the big things is the octane rating. It's a lot higher than regular petrol.
Yeah. So what does that mean for, performance?
Higher octane means you can run more boost, more compression,
Right.
and it actually runs cooler than petrol,
Oh, right. Okay.
which is a bonus.
So more power, runs cooler. What's the catch?
Well, the catch is you need to flow a lot more E85 than petrol to make the same power.
Okay. Why is that?
Well, because it just doesn't burn as efficiently as petrol. So imagine a garden hose filling up a swimming pool versus a fire hose.
Right.
You need that bigger flow to get the job done quickly.
So that means bigger injectors, bigger fuel pump.
Yeah, you'll need to retune it.
Yeah. Okay, so if someone was thinking about switching to E85, can they just chuck it straight in their car?
No, definitely not. E85 is pretty harsh on normal fuel systems.
Ah, right. So what sort of parts need to be compatible with E85?
Pretty much the whole fuel system. You've got injectors, fuel pressure regulators, fuel filters, fuel lines, fittings,
Wow.
the whole lot.
Okay.
And importantly, the fuel tank.
So before we get into the specifics of, what parts and what we should be looking for in parts, let's talk about why E85 is so harsh on a regular fuel system.
Okay, so E85 can corrode certain materials in your fuel system. So using regular parts with E85 can cause all sorts of problems. Leaks, performance issues, even complete fuel system failure.
Wow, that sounds pretty bad. What kind of materials don't get along with E85?
Some rubber hoses and seals, some metals as well, and even some plastics.
Right. So it's really important to use the correct parts.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've talked about needing more fuel flow. How much more are we talking?
You're looking at 30 to 40% more flow.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
It's a fair bit.
Okay. Now, aside from performance, why else would someone switch to E85?
Well, it burns cleaner than petrol, so it's better for the environment.
Right.
And depending on where you live, it can be cheaper than petrol.
Oh, right. So it's better for the environment and potentially cheaper. That's a win-win.
Exactly.
All right. So if our listeners are thinking about switching to E85, what do we have available at EFI Hardware to help them do that?
Wow. We've got a full range of E85 compatible components.
Awesome.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those specific parts that you need to run E85.
Sounds good.
Let's start with fuel injectors.
Okay.
They're obviously a pretty critical part of the fuel system. They deliver the fuel.
Yeah. What should we be looking for when we're choosing injectors specifically for E85?
Well, like we said earlier, E85 needs a much higher flow rate than regular petrol. You're looking at about 30 to 40% more, so you'll need to go up in size. And the other important thing is material compatibility cause. E85 can be pretty harsh, so you need injectors that can handle it.
Yeah.
You're looking for stainless steel bodies and compatible internal components as well.
Right. So they've got to be built tough.
Yeah, for sure.
What about the fuel pressure regulator?
Yeah, the regulator. That's another important one. That's what maintains the correct fuel pressure in the system.
Right. And we've got that increased flow from the E85.
Yep. So you need a regulator that can handle the higher volume. And like the injectors, it's got to be compatible with E85.
Okay. So higher flow, E85 compatible materials.
Got it.
What about fuel filters?
Yeah. Fuel filters. E85 can actually have more impurities in it than petrol.
Really?
Yeah. So you need a filter that can, trap all those little bits and pieces and protect the injectors.
Right. So what kind of filter should we be looking for? And of course, the filter material itself needs to be compatible with ethanol.
Got it. So finer filtration and E85 compatible materials. What about the fuel pump?
Yeah, the fuel pump. It's a big one.
Yeah, it's going to do a lot of work.
Yeah, it does. It's pushing a lot more fuel with E85. So you need a high flow pump, something that can handle the volume and the pressure. There are different types of pumps, like in-tank pumps and external pumps. You just got to make sure you choose one. That's designed for E85.
Okay, so high flow. And what about the materials?
Yeah, materials are super important for the pump as well. It's constantly exposed to the E85, so it needs to be built tough.
Right. So we've covered injectors, the regulator, filters, and the pump. What about fuel lines and fittings?
Yeah, the lines and fittings, they're really important too. They're like the plumbing of your fuel system.
Yeah.
And they need to be able to handle E85.
So what should we be using?
Well, Stainless steel braided lines are a good option. They're strong, and they can handle the pressure.
And for the fittings. And fittings are a good choice. They're specifically designed for performance fuel systems.
Right, so stainless steel lines and AN fittings.
What about the fuel tank itself?
Yes, the fuel tank. That can be a tricky one.
Yeah.
Some older fuel tanks have parts that, well, they don't really like E85.
Right.
They can break down.
So do we need to replace the whole tank?
Well, if you're using an older tank,
Yeah.
probably the best thing to do is replace it with an E85 compatible one.
Right.
But there are also conversion kits available if you don't want to replace the whole tank.
Okay. So either replace it
Yeah.
or look into a conversion kit.
Why?
Yeah.
Now, what about flex fuel sensors?
Yeah. Flex fuel sensors. They're handy if you want to run both E85 and petrol.
Right.
The sensor measures how much ethanol is in your fuel, and then it tells the engine computer how to adjust everything.
Well, that's cool. So you can just chuck whatever fuel you want in it.
Pretty much. Gives you a lot of flexibility.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different parts here. Sounds like there's a lot to think about when it comes to E85.
Yeah, there is, but it's definitely worth it if you're chasing more power.
Yeah. And like you said, EFI Hardware has everything we need.
That's right. We've got all the E85 compatible parts you need.
Awesome. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of E85, what it is, and why it's so good for performance.
Yeah, so E85, it's a blend of petrol and ethanol, and it's got a really high octane rating,
Right.
which means you can run a lot more boost, more compression,
Yep.
and it can make more power than regular petrol.
Now, we've talked about how you can't just pour E85 into any car. Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, so regular fuel systems, they're not designed for E85.
Okay.
E85 can be pretty corrosive. It can actually damage some of the parts in a normal fuel system.
Right.
So if you want to run E85, you need to make sure you've got all the right parts.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You need compatible injectors, fuel lines, fuel pump, filters, the whole lot.
And we've got all that at EFI Hardware.
That's right. We've got everything you need to convert your car to E85.
Awesome. Well, that's about it for this episode. We've covered a fair bit about E85.
Yeah. Hopefully it's been helpful.
If you're thinking about making the switch to E85, make sure you do your research.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you have any questions, just get in touch with us at EFI Hardware.
We're always happy to help.
All right, thanks for listening.
See you later.